So I'm Rachael Saunders. I'm the Deputy Director of the IBE, and it's brilliant to have you here today and to have the opportunity to talk to Maria about human-centric AI. So a huge topic, and AI is something that we've been opening a number of conversations about at the IBE over the last few months, which is how I was lucky enough to be introduced to Maria, who has a brilliant position of being a kind of you're almost a one-woman internal think tank at PwC, Maria. That's almost how I'd describe you, an internal expert at PwC, but also with really powerful external relationships as well. So working with regulators and other policymakers and experts on the future of AI. So huge thanks, Maria, for being with us today. Should we just start off? Did you want to introduce yourself and just say a little bit about your role and kind of what your day job looks like? It's a fabulous day job.
Of course. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. Pleasure to be here. I work for PwC. I've been with the firm for 10 years now. And at some point about 7.5 years ago, I landed, or probably was the other way around, the whole AI landed on my desk, and I just had to make sense of it, and being able to explore what AI means for a company like ours, a professional service company. There's the intersection of different business domains and industries. So we're not a technology company per se, but we work a lot with technology and helping our clients understand technology. So part of this exploration is when we discover the responsible AI domain, and actually we really necessarily discover the domain per se, but an extension of who we are as a firm. The fact that we support our clients understand and operate around risk, and being able to identify and measure and manage that risk in different contexts was the key ingredient that allow us to look with those lenses and a phenomenon like AI. And as early on, I think we instinctively knew that AI as technology is much more than a data set and a model. It also has deep connection to the external environment and the context. And although at the time we are not able to really articulate the fact that AI is a socio-technical system, it was later on when researchers actually put that label, we instinctively knew that AI is different, and it has this symbiosis, if you want, with the context. Hence, the context needs to be right. So why do I go back to the history is because that's how my roles grow as we grow our understanding. So at first it was a lot of exploration and a lot of like a blank page on what is AI, what's the role of a company like PwC. And then the second stage was, how can we really define the concept of responsible AI? What is it for us? What is it for our clients? And what is it for the wider society, where I assume at some point, well, we ended up developing a proposition, the role of responsible AI lead for the UK firm. And then in the last year or so, part of the responsible AI growing in a board level, a strategic level issue, I started focusing more on the policy, regulatory, and ethics, and being able to develop a capability that assembles different teams that we have on compliance and risk and regulatory affairs, ethics and independence, but with the specific issues that AI brings, and create like a bridge in between what we do internally, but also how do we present ourselves and interact with different entities that benefit from our experience.
Sorry, meet amateur. That's fantastic. Thank you. And just thinking about some of the the AI debate feels like it's been going on for a while, but it's really only been a couple of years that, public policymakers and businesses have been really grappling with this. And the early ethical issues were maybe kind of issues which we were already aware of on the ethics agenda, but that we started to apply to AI. So we worried about things like equalities and bias and use of data and privacy. Do you feel like we've made progress now on some of those issues? Do you think we have guardrails in place to help us address the risks of bias within the system, with the associated qualities concerns, and how, you know, do businesses know now how to manage issues like data privacy? Do you think, where have we got to with those early conversations?
I would say tremendous progress. I have been part of the second wave of experts. The first one, I would label those who, like Stuart Russell, our own Stuart Russell, started working in AI longer than we've been alive, so 34, 35, 40 years in some cases. And then because I've been part of that, the second wave of experts, I got to see how AI is being discussed in the wider society as early 2016, 2017, and how the narrative progressed, and how various apparently small incidents ended up shaping or raising alarm on some of the negative implications of AI. And while in 2017 to 2018, the conversation was very much black and white, AI is either going to save humanity or AI is going to destroy humanity. What we have seen over the years with the emerging of experimentation happening above and beyond tech companies, but also AI system being adopted at scales, or many companies acknowledging they actually have been working with AI for decades. Is the case of financial services. We've seen a change in that narrative, and we went from that polarized positioning or framing of AI, something that's a little bit more rounded, understanding that AI is different from previous technology because it has agency, because it adapts to external environment, shapes it, but also is being shaped by it, but also has the ability to learn, continue to learn, and function without human supervision. And as a result, we need to be able to start adapting the processes, the human-led processes that deterministic in nature, to that new technology that is different, operates 24/7 at scale with probabilistic results. And I think that's what has changed over the years, that we got better in understanding the essence of AI, and with that, how to prepare ourselves to be able to work with this technology, derive its benefit, but also being able to prepare for the risks. And when it comes to something like bias, researchers and engineers knew firsthand, because they have seen their system displaying discriminatory outcomes early on. And they did what they could do best, which is address the issue at the level of the system itself, which is the data set and the model. And I remember one of the most well-known cases of discrimination in AI was a tool that Amazon built in 2017, 2018, a recruitment tool, which ended up being biased against women. And when I spoke with the lead engineering who oversaw the development of the tool, he shared all the different interventions they had to debias the data set, then address the bias in the model. It still wasn't enough, and they just didn't really understand what was needed more to ensure that their tool will have desired approaches. And I think it was about that time when some of the researchers started to point out that, of course, by the time to go to a data set, you already have kind of build it with a bias, with a default bias, and you've encapsulated many discriminatory issues that already exist in society. So I think that was the time when many have realized that no matter how good engineering interventions are, there is a flaw with the approach. Is the fact that what it wasn't recognized at the time, that Amazon employed 70% of the workforce was white men. And when a system was trained on that historical data, will of course favor that population. So, and the issue kept on growing in terms of understanding, meaning that it's not just about the fact historically organizations have been biased, even if they admitted it or not. In order to redress that, you need to have a vision of what is a fair employment, or where is a fair organization? How do we define it? What is the proportion? How do we go above and beyond gender fairness and look at all the other attributes, and how do we determine the percentage? And I think that was something that is much more to do with social scientists than engineering practices. And when the engineers said like, oh, this is not our domain, come and help us. And gradually over time, with the help of events like this that made the risks of AI clear and present dangers, we started seeing the different level of complexity that AI brings. And nowadays, the fact that we have so much open source content that will help organizations guide them in addressing various implications of AI, it's a great achievement. And secondly, we've seen all the big tech or hyperscalers and cloud providers offering free of charge open source tools that will address those issues. So the progress has been immense in a very short period of time. However, with the rate of improvement of AI, we don't have that much time. So to a certain extent, I would say, yes, it was amazing progress if you report it to our human standards. But when you look at how fast AI improves, we need to be a bit better.
Yes, that's really important, isn't it? That the will is there, and that the expertise in many ways is there, but that we're the speed of change is only accelerating. Do you think that, so one of the things that has shifted the public debate on all of this was when ChatGPT was created? So AI is obviously a very big category. There are lots of different technologies that exist within that broad category, but large language models and generative AI is something that kind of the general public has been able to deal with over and start to see opportunities with over the last few months. Really, has that significantly improved the public debate? Do you think we're better informed now? We have a better understanding of the the very many options and what this technology might bring to our working lives, say, as a starting point.
2022, November 2022 is going to be a date that will go down in history, when a tiny little tool, it was tiny at the time, was released to the public as a research experiment. OpenAI did not expect this to become a huge platform that will just take over the world. And to a certain extent, it's fair to say technology existed. So from a pure tech perspective, this was not revolutionary. What was revolutionary is that tech was accessed by millions of people. And because AI adapts to its external environment and continues to learn, imagine using the corpus of data that exists on the internet, plus you supplement that with real life learning through interaction the model has with millions of people, hundreds of millions of people in this case. And that was the moment when us as recipients of AI outcomes, because AI was in our life for a long time, but we didn't really call it AI. The fact that we have the e-commerce platform Amazon, pioneer one of the first recommendation engine, the betterizer as they call it, which gave us the amazing ability to order books over and over again, books you didn't even know you wanted to read. The same with Netflix, not to mention Google, right? So Google search is built on AI capability, like as every other digital products, not to mention social media. But in this case, we were recipients of an outcome. We were not part of that supply chain. But suddenly ChatGPT comes and sucks us in, meaning that we're not just the recipients, we are part of that creative value chain, meaning that we are using the tool to generate new content, to work with existing content, to search and manage content that otherwise would have been quite difficult, because how many of us have programming skills to be able to to do that before, but now you have an interface and you can interact with this very powerful model in a way that was not possible before. And that has done so much, that has benefited tremendously the narrative. First of all, people could see firsthand what before was just theoretical. You know, we had to trust people like Stephen Hawking or Elon Musk or all the other gurus or celebrities telling us what an amazing tool AI is. But now, you know, everyone can see it firsthand. They can sign up, they can have an account and then start playing with it. What has happened since then is we see OpenAI used as a platform, as an infrastructure to build a variety of tools and solutions on top of it. And suddenly the world of possibility has exploded. Exponential opportunities have unfolded as a result that we've had that much creativity interacted with the self-learning algorithm. And because of this huge opportunity, we changed the narrative. People are probably more confident that AI is still a tool. It's not as powerful as sometimes it made to believe in the public narrative, but in the same time, we still have a lot of control of how this tool is ended up embedded in our day-to-day life. And we have a word to say, which was not possible before. And what makes me really excited about the future prospect is that now we have potentially hundreds of millions of people who are much more knowledgeable of what AI is, because they are working, they are using AI day to day, and they are able to come and work with the designers and the architects of AI to design it in a way that is aligned with what we need as individuals and a society.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. Just to say, I've got a couple more questions for Maria, but really keen, and I know that many participants will have their own questions. So please do use the Q&A box on Zoom, and I'll bring those in as we can. So any questions or comments at all, please do use the Q&A box. But my next question for you is to move you on to some of the specific ethical issues that have arisen since maybe even since people, yes, kind of widespread use of generative AI. We started talking about the kind of existing ethical issues that people apply to AI, but there have been some new issues that maybe weren't previously kind of high profile in the ethics field, but which have been brought to our collective attention because of AI. So that might be issues like impersonation. So, you know, this year is the year of elections. There are elections all over the world. We have seen some examples, I think, of impersonation. I don't know that anyone would claim that an election has been determined yet by that kind of fraud, but I think there's a real risk and a substantial concern out there that impersonation could be misused within democracies or in other contexts. And then one of the other kind of very current issues is intellectual property and, you know, the fairness of training large language models on different people's ideas. Where do you think we are in terms of responding to some of those very current issues, which feels like have been, you know, brought to our attention specifically because of the use of generative AI?
Let's start with the elections. We are in the middle of elections ourselves here in the UK, and it's fair to say we haven't really seen anything significant in terms of using AI in the campaign. It might be, and perhaps it's not obvious, but so far so good, and we're not very far from the end date. It's fair to say that when it comes to other jurisdictions, things will change, and it also has to do with the culture of the country and how the parties potentially interact with each other, the level of trust they placed on each other, the level of chivalry and respect they have for one another. What I've heard, and I haven't really dig into it, is that, you know, India had elections and there was a rampage of deepfake that was used. Whether that has influence or not the election remains to be seen. Like always, it's hard to demonstrate, a swing of preferences one way or another. It's determined solely by use of misinformation or disinformation. However, what I found interesting when you're looking at US, where we potentially could see truly at the world scale, the world stage, the use of AI, more malicious use of AI in election, was the fact that about a few months back, there was a number of sexual deepfakes of Taylor Swift, and Taylor Swift is the queen of the world, right? So she's well loved around the world. She boasts millions, if not hundreds of millions of fans, very loyal fans. And what I found fascinating about that event, it felt to me like a bit of a threat and warning. It's like, if we can do this for Taylor Swift, we can do this for everyone. But at the same time, I took it as a positive outcome. Is the fact suddenly, because it was about Taylor Swift, it was like a warning to everyone to be on the outlook, to detect the possibility of the deepfakes. To a certain extent, the pendulum went the other way around, in questioning even valid videos of being AI fake, and was the case of Princess Catherine and her video, sharing the sad news of her cancer, has been heavily scrutinized online and been accused of being AI generated. And I think that's, if you look at those two phenomena, the fact that you have a deep fake and then we have a valid video that was recorded by BBC, with one of the members of the royal family, and the scrutiny it got as being AI, you can tell that people are starting to educate themselves. You see that there is a more critical thinking apply. Of course, in this case, Princess Catherine's video was unjustified, but at least what I took away from it is that people are now scrutinizing even the official videos, and like it or not, they will be probably better prepared. But in the same time, it will be harder for politicians to get their message across, because in a context and environment that trust has been eroding for years, and especially in a public institution, it's going to be difficult for the candidates to be able to put content out there and get it across without, potentially being called out as being, deep fakes or misinformation. So I think we just need to remain optimistic, and be in the outlook, and be curious and continue to learn and observe those as potential learning opportunities, where we'll learn more about AI, how it's being misused or used in elections, and what do we want to do about it in the years to come, and how we as individuals would want to be part of shaping AI. And the last thing I wanted to say about elections is that it's not just all doom and gloom. I think AI could, as is proven already with so many different applications, be a saving grace in elections, in being able to really target the message to specific audiences, and being able to deliver answers to the questions in a way that it's seen not so much shaped by a political agenda, but the real and genuine information that voters will look for. And in fact, it has the potential to build trust by giving robust information and data that in a world of mistrust and lack of potential choices, some might say, can start building trust alongside politicians. But perhaps we're not prepared this electoral cycle, at least here in the UK. But perhaps, who knows, in the years to come, we'll see some sort of a code of conduct of AI use in elections, and that will further prove that AI in this context is not only that to be misused, but can have big benefits if it's used correctly.
I think a code of conduct is a great idea. We've had a comment through from someone called saying, I think it's important to ensure when we talk about AI, we're careful not to just talk about generative AI. Not traditional social media algorithms have been shown in studies to have a decisive impact on past elections, including the Brexit referendum. And I'm sure that's true. I suppose my question to you would be, social media algorithms have been blamed for polarization. So, you know, the more you respond to content, the more of it that you see, and that can drive polarization because we respond more to things that make us feel more emotional and maybe more angry. So we see more of the content that we have a stronger emotional reaction to. As a kind of a modification to that, though, over the last few weeks, I've definitely noticed that social media platforms have been making it much easier for people to challenge statements which are made online. So the kind of fact checking has now been democratized, and anybody can say, actually, you know, that thing that person said wasn't true, or it was partially true, but I'd like to, you know, to challenge it and to offer some further context. So whilst I think algorithms can be to some extent held responsible for polarization, there is increasingly the functionality on social media to kind of offer a more reasoned and context-based perspective. I suppose within that, what if I mean, and I know that you work with businesses at PwC and you support your colleagues who are advising businesses all the time on some of these issues. As a business thinking about communicating in that kind of social media context with rapid polarization, and equally with the ability for people to challenge the statements that businesses are making online, what advice would you give to communications professionals trying to engage authentically in that context?
That's such a good and interesting question, and I wonder where's the best angle to go. First of all, you know, social media platforms have built the plane and learn how to fly it in the same time, and it is very much what we're doing with AI. Is the fact that they were, of course, surprised to see the immense uptake of social media platforms since 2017 and 2018. But I think if we take a step back and look at how we have evolved as a society in the last few decades, it wouldn't be fair to blame solely the algorithms for the degradation of our social fabric. We've seen over decades the trust eroding in various jurisdictions for various reasons. We've seen the social connection weakening, and as a result, people being pushed further away from each other. And it just feels like the screens were yet another healthy distraction in not having to continue to invest in relationship. And in fact, there is a fabulous book by Johan Hari called Lost Connections, where he analyzes what are the main causes of the fact that we are way less and less connected with each other. And suddenly you have algorithms that create those echo chambers, and we find it so comforting and comfortable to allow ourselves to be sucked in those bubbles without pushing back. And the best way to push it back is not to resort to finding information solely online. And the best way to contract the limitations of the information world driven by algorithms is to have that balance face-to-face, in-person way of interacting with the others of every level, being communicators in business, being politicians. We need to go back and invest in analog opportunities of interacting with each other. Of course, some might say we will not have the scale. We still need the online world to augment our message, and that's absolutely fine. That's why we had the radio and TV in the past. But it feels like in the last few years, we've relied solely on and primarily on the internet as our main source of information. And to a certain extent, that actually has heightened the toxicity online, is because it's so easy to say horrible things when you're in front of a screen and you don't see the face and you don't feel the punch in a face you apply to someone with your words, you will never say those things if you had the person face to face. You will not say it, first of all, because they're strangers and you don't speak like that to a stranger. And also because, you know, if you say something horrible, they will react and then you got hurt. So I think to a certain extent, I feel like we need to start taking a little bit of a step back from the digital tools and see how can we rely on this person-to-person, face-to-face interaction. And I think that is the challenge, but in a very good way for communicators. How do we start looking and going beyond lengthy words on pages and traditional digital marketing into something that feels a bit more genuine, a bit more authentic? And I've seen many of our clients and our peers in industries really leveraging their experts and showcasing the human side of the experts. And it's not just all about selling product, services, knowledge, data. Is about who we are as people coming together in our respective organization, and how are we able to continue to build trust in one another. And I think that's something that sometimes, because technology is so new and shiny and so potent, it's kind of a mist, is the fact that we still are human, made of flesh and blood and bones, and we should bring ourselves entirely to work, and we should be able to have face-to-face conversations and being able to work with one another, sometimes really putting technology aside. And I think that's the challenges to the years to come. How do we use the amazing potential of the digital world, but as complementary and an add-on to our human-to-human interaction?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that combination of, and this is so relevant to all employees, isn't it, of making sure that we retain that time to come together as you say, as people, as human beings, and realizing that technology can't completely replace that, and that alongside the opportunity that technology brings to showcase people and for them to show their complexity and, you know, as much as they feel able to online, in order to build trust as well. We have a question from Dr. Liesel Gronwald, which is, and I'm not sure I completely understand this question, so I will just read it out. What are the challenges in combining reactive and deliberative intelligence for human-centric AI?
What do you think it means?
So I'm not sure. Dr. Liesel, I don't know if you might be willing to clarify a bit, because I don't claim to understand the question, and if Maria doesn't either, then we might need a bit more detail as to the kind of the scenarios that you might be wanting us to respond to. So maybe if Dr. Gronwald, you could give us an example of combining reactive and deliberative intelligence, that'd be super useful. Thank you. We've got another one. Going back to something that we were speaking about earlier, Maria, which is, do you have any tips or thoughts about what needs to happen to address structural bias such as racism, misogyny, etc.? So you spoke about the importance of being clear about the kind of the data set. So the AMA is an example of, you know, if you employ 70% men and then use that data set to train the model, then, you know, the bias is already built in. Is there anything else to reflect on in terms of addressing issues like racism and misogyny within these tools?
What we've learned about the AI is that it acts as a mirror, like it or not. It would reflect the state of a certain context. So if the context is discriminatory, that's what it's going to highlight. And it's not going to highlight it, it will augment it and make it much better, because that's what those algorithms are betterizing machines. And the huge opportunity we have had is to actually understand the level of discrimination and inequality that exists in certain contexts, and being able to really take that honest route of acknowledging that and starting to fix it. Machines are not going to do this for ourselves. Those algorithms are pattern findings on steroids, if you want. So if the patterns are crooked, then of course it's going to just put that on steroids. So we need to be able to use this mirror, the AI mirror, and then being able to have an honest conversation. And we started having this, is the fact that at the same time of adoption of AI, we've seen a rise, a phenomenal rise in conversation around gender and race and nationality and any other attributes is perhaps, I mean, it's just my personal observation, it is not random. It happens in the same time. We have seen some highly popularized use cases like the one with Amazon, but also we've seen other algorithms deciding the grades of students, A-level students in UK, was no connection to the actual performance. And we've seen algorithm discriminating wrongfully social benefits claimants in the Netherlands, and then similarly punishing people of color in the US. And as a result, you know, that has kind of fueled further the fact that there are many issues we need to solve in a society. Now we have the opportunity, and it's a bit urgent because we are in a moment when we start digitizing and automating a lot of our processes, and we need to be very careful because we might end up automating inequality left and right. So before we have a bit of a window of opportunity to stop and reflect and unpack each of those processes. It's like in a justice content, or is it policing content? How do we identify those who are committing offenses, or those who have a higher propensity to do so, and how do we address those issues in a way that is independent of, you know, attributes like race or color of the skin or gender or so have you. And I think that is not an easy process, but I think if we do it intentionally, case by case, and we ask questions and we push back, we'll be in a better position. I think the way to do it, I would say, is demand for transparency in pushback. And it's exciting to see that UK government has one of the principles, that AI regulation principle, is contestability and redress, which gives the opportunity to users and consumers and patients and students and wherever hats we're wearing in relation to a service, is to push back against the decision. And that's an excellent start, because it showcases at the highest level of policy possible to say that our voices matter. And that is, you know, demanding transparency and explainability of why certain decisions are made in relation with us is the first steps. We can do the same in our own organization, is demand for transparency, being able to demand to be part of certain decision-making around the design and implementation of AI. While, you know, we have a long journey ahead of addressing those huge societal issues, and we see some of them being addressed faster than others with help of the political corpus and the pressure from civil society. Others will still linger for years. So I think we are in a very good position to acknowledge that, one, AI is replicating the patterns that it finds and the crook patterns that it's find, but two, we are now way better equipped with experts and with expertise, but also with opportunities for those patterns to be challenged, and therefore those classification to be addressed, the discriminatory classification. And in order for us to move to a better society, we also need to have a vision of the future. As I said, like one of the challenges Amazon had, and many organizations will have when it comes to recruitment, is like, what exactly do we mean when we say we are a diverse and inclusive organization? And how do we build that? How do we make sure that before we start using those algorithms, we do know where we want to be from a diversity and inclusion perspective, and we are honest how we operate as a business, left and right, not just in respect to a narrow algorithms we have, you know, landed on a recruitment process.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really useful. And I'm really glad that you brought up that point around contestability, because I think what makes a lot of people nervous about generative AI is that kind of black box sense. So even if you could keep track of everything that you train the machine on, which in itself is, infinite and unlikely to be trackable or transparent, we're never really going to have visibility of exactly how the algorithms are interacting in terms of the kind of the black box and then what comes out. So, as increasingly decisions are being made using AI or whatever, it's not going to be possible to necessarily sort of hold the black box to account, as it were. But what is vital is the ability to contest. So the ability to say, actually, this decision that's been made isn't right, and I want a human to check it. And that's really important. I think that's probably something that's important for everyone to be aware of, that principle is embedded and clear and widely understood and needs to be maintained. So Liesl has put something more in the chat, which is, I think, really interesting. It's probably more of a technical question than an ethical question, but an important and interesting one. So reactive systems respond quickly to stimuli, e.g. chatbots, and deliberative systems take a longer term view and consider consequences such as route planning. So her question is it possible to combine these types of systems, so chatbots that can think about consequences or help with decision making? I think that's a kind of, what does the future of the technology look like question. I don't know if you have any thoughts about it. It seems I think there probably are already some, in the sense that there are some AI bots that, for example, can review lots of information. So they're kind of somewhere in the middle. But did you have any thoughts on that, or is it something that we accept as a really interesting, useful thought from Lisa?
Absolutely, and I now really understand the question, and I think it's a brilliant way of thinking. How do we start deconstructing our processes, and where and how we're going to use increasingly advanced chatbots slash agents slash assistants in help us understand the consequences. But what I would say is that in this process, we should always remain human first, especially when we're talking about life and death decisions or very important decision, and until we have in increased trustworthiness of the systems. We know that the moment there's a huge reliability and accuracy problem with those systems, and because they have been trained on a corpus of data crooked with many issues, like the whole corpus of available data on the internet, and as a result, it leverage all what's wrong with us as a society. So we still need to have, for the foreseeable future, that human in the loop that will allow us to leverage the ability to understand and identify consequences. And those tools are extremely good at providing you with a 360 degree view of a specific event, but in the same time, being able to use the deliberative processes, which is all about engaging different perspective and being able to really bring human along on the journey and complement each other, whether or not one or the other will take will become the majority or preferred solution. I think it's contextual depending. If it's in a case of medical applications of AI, it's enough to look at some of the experimental consultations or citizen juries that have been conducted, especially here in the UK, to say for diagnostic, patients will rely on a machine as long as they provide a higher accuracy or the diagnostic, but not when that diagnostic is being shared. They will prefer to hear that news from a qualified practitioners, because it's not just about hearing about the diagnostic. It's about how you're being told, and the whole human energy and compassion that surrounds, especially when that diagnostic is one we fear the most. And I think it's like to keep in mind that we're still very much in a process of deconstructing a lot of our processes in a society and see where AI is better placed. And we need to go step by step, context by context, before we generalize. But as a rule of thumb, I will still want us to, first of all, push ourselves to bring all the voices that need to be involved in and deliberate for as long as we need to build confidence and also start gradually to build trust and come from a perspective that is well supported and understood by the collective before we rely more heavily on tools that can provide us with additional information and insight and could prompt us with the better paths for decision making. But in the end, we still want to remain in control. We still need to remain in control also because we want to preserve our accountability and responsibility for as long as possible, rather than just saying, the machine made me do it, the machine said so, which is an easy escape. And we'll see those type of behavior emerge very much because it's so much more difficult to stand by your decision and action, especially in a critical situation, than to say it wasn't me, to deflect your responsibility.
Thank you. I have two more quite big questions for you. The first one is, could you say something to fill us with some optimism about current thinking, kind of regulatory thinking, policy thinking, like what's useful, what are you glad that, is currently being worked on and considered? And then my last question, which I'll just make you aware of now, so you can maybe one flows into the other, but we'll come back in between, no doubt, is where would you like us to go, either in terms of maybe first regulations, so what are the guardrails that we need to have in place, but then in terms of opportunity, and and hopefully we can finish with the discussion about human-centric AI. Like, what is the opportunity here? What could we be excited and optimistic about? But to start with, kind of what fills you with some optimism in terms of the kind of regulatory and policy work that's currently happening? What's the good work that's happening now?
I have been working with our regulators now for a number of years, and I've seen how they grew in confidence, first of all, that they understand this phenomenon. I think that was like a shared journey for many of us, is that first of all, we jump into unknown. What is this AI we're talking about? And what is our role as, professional services firms or industry players or regulators or policymakers? And I think that was the first big hurdle to be passed, is the fact that, at least for the perspective of our main regulators, they have a greater ability to understand AI. They have more specialized skills to be able to address it, and more of a clearer path of how to intervene. And the fact that UK government took a different approach than, let's say, EU AI Act, which is a blanket regulation on all the AI systems operating across the economy. UK approach very much is grounded into existing pieces of regulation that could be very easily adapted and utilized for use of AI in specific contexts. So if you are in financial services, there's a ton of regulation that could work really well in the context of AI and will be much more impactful than waiting for 5 to 6 years for a law like the EU AI Act to pass. So that's the first good news, is that we see the regulators being better equipped, but they will still need support. And the second big news is that last year has meant that not just part of the 180 million known users of ChatGPT, there were many politicians. And the fact that is now a big on the political agenda, and we've seen hundreds of bills in the US, AI bills being proposed, to be more precise, 456 about both federal and state level laws it's clear that the interest in there. And let's give credit where it's due. Our current government and with the current prime minister has seen AI as one of the engine for growth, and they have consolidated a very strong foundation of AI, both from a perspective of regulation and guardrails, but also industry and potential to leverage AI to deliver economic and social values. So that's the second big news, is that if there is political attention and scrutiny, there's an expectation for resources to support the regulators doing a better job. And if we are to look at the Labour manifesto, they are talking about having a regulatory innovation unit that will further support the regulators to innovate rather than rush into placing new rules that might hinder innovation. And the last news is that good news is all of us, we are much better informed on what AI is and how AI can be used in our day-to-day life. And by having this experience, we're able to be active in pushing back against toxic and unrealistic narratives, pushing back against decisions that are being made in our respective worlds, pushing back against decision made by systems in our world. Because ultimately, for AI to really being able to be guarded, not to go rogue and be focused on growing those benefits, we really need to have all eyes on deck. We should not rely solely on intervention from the regulators, safety intervention from the builder of such platform. We need to be on the looks. This technology is still emerging. There's so much we need to learn about it in various contexts, and having this huge army, I would call army of fighting for responsible AI, being on the look and continue to educate themselves to be working better and using better AI, will be in a better position. But we should not rely solely on the regulators. We should not rely solely on the goodwill of those companies. We should have a number of interventions, from certification and standards to voluntary codes of conduct and commitments, and activists that will keep an eye on those systems context by context, and make sure that we continue to fine-tune and craft it until we grow in that confidence that both we know how to use it in our benefits, and the ways design and continue to operate is aligned with what we think is best for us.
Yeah, and I think that's a really useful message to employers as well. Like, in our experience, some businesses, obviously, including your own at PwC, have really thought about this and have been really imaginative about the use of AI and generative AI, but some businesses are at a different stage of the journey. And I think one of the messages that I would give is that the chances are, within any organization, very many people are already using some of these tools, certainly in terms of their own personal lives and their leisure time, but there's every chance that they're using some AI tools to help them do their jobs now. Like, for example, I use an app called Perplexity, which is just a bit better at asking questions than Google. It kind of exercises a bit more judgment for you through the algorithm. And I just kind of ask it questions sometimes on my phone. That's not something that I do officially in my job role on my job computer. It's just there, and I find it helpful and useful. And I think it's just one example, but I think that in most organizations, once the conversations open up, people will find that there are lots of AI tools already being used to help people do their jobs better and more efficiently, and that having early conversations about what's appropriate, what information's appropriate to share, how it's appropriate to be transparent in the use of their tools, but also sharing advice and support. If we found something that's helpful, then let's all use it. Sometimes I think organizations might be a little bit nervous, but actually opening up those conversations and discussions is the way forward, really, in terms of both ethics and what's right and wrong, but also in terms of moving forward and maximizing the support that these tools can give us with productivity. Is that something that you've seen done well anywhere at all?
I think that's, I mean, from what you describe, it's like there's lots of examples, lots of positive examples. But I think I remember someone said one of the questions, we should not focus on generative AI before looking at all the other types of AI that have been used in place and they deliver real tangible value. And the reason I'm saying this is that just before announcement of the election, there was a news that actually didn't make the headlines, and it should have been as a breaking news because it's that important. So the government has piloted in NHS the use of an AI tool to read mammograms. And that proved to be a very successful pilot, delivering 2.5 faster results in a time when we have huge waiting lines, plus a lack of radiologists. And what this has, what the government has done as a result of this 2 years pilot is to start rolling this system across the NHS. I can't stress how important this news is in a context of NHS struggling to cope with the volume of activity, and in the same time the stress we all have in the UK of not having the confidence we can receive the medical care we require, the time of we require. And suddenly you can see how AI is going to solve twofold of a problem: the lack of specialized medical resources, but providing that very early diagnostic, which potentially could lead to many lives being saved. And this application of AI is the one that is, a rather simple pattern recognition algorithm trained on a large volume of mammogram. So what it does is being able to spot cancerous cells much faster than a human. And by looking those narrow AI application, you can see that in the end, those general purpose AIs like generative AI, it just promises the world at some point, is not the only AI system, is not the only technology system that will make a massive difference in the world of many. And we should not forget that the world of technology is not just about artificial intelligence. There are so many other emerging and upcoming technologies that will start converging slowly, giving us, rounded solution case by case. And I'm talking about spatial computing. I'm talking the ability to be able to have powerful enough computers to be able to crunch the increasing volume of data and the need for even faster insights at every level, a corner of society. So from that perspective, we should take a step back and not only focus on generative AI, because the world of technology is much bigger than generative AI. Is improved with the example with the cancer diagnostic. Sometimes a simple tool can be life-saving and make all the difference that we hope a system like this will make.
Yeah, I think the cancer diagnostic example is such an exciting one, and in some ways illustrates the point. So we have someone who's not given their name, who's asked the kind of the doom question. So is it possible that the majority of jobs will be done by AI in the next 50 years? And if so, how do humans retain meaning and agency in the world? So my sense is that the answer is no, and that technology will supplement what people can do rather than replacing us. But what's your sense? And coming back to your concept of human-centric AI, how do we make sure that we make the right decisions so that, as in the cancer diagnostic example, the technology can be used to serve us and to do things more efficiently and better to help us, rather than us in some way losing control as a species?
I will address this question in twofold. First of all, what do we need to do from a process perspective? And secondly, what do we need to do from a human perspective, so we don't get into a scenario that 50 years from now there's nothing for us to do. I'm sure there'll be plenty of things to do for us. And if there wouldn't be, we'll invent some. It's enough to look at throughout our history what a creative species we are. So first of all, I think it's like going back to this use case, it's a cancer diagnostic. It takes quite a bit of time to be able to develop the tool, to be able to gather data, train the algorithms, and then pilot it and make sure it works in the right context. And then when you have the confidence, scale it. And scale it itself, just because the government has made an announcement, it doesn't make that's going to happen overnight. You still need to go through a process of implementing these tools in all the NHS trusts around the country. So what this says is that when we want to use AI efficiently and to deliver value, and sometimes we will not be able to measure that value straight away, we need to give ourselves time. We need to give ourselves enough time to be able to deconstruct and reconstruct their processes with the use of AI. Sometimes we'll just turn that process on its head, and sometimes we'll scrap it all together and build a new process where most of the tasks will be automated and AI driven, but there will still be, potentially some human intervention, depending again on the context. And I think in this process, we also need to take a step back and assess what will be the implication. So if we ended up using or deploying an AI, which was the case of a bank in US, which was in the news yesterday. So a bank in US developed an AI application for a call center to detect when the call center staff will get close to the breaking point, and play them a video with nice photographs of their families and music to calm them down. Where in fact, what this application, which is interesting and has its own merit, it was designed as a result of a previous automation and digitization. They put a lot of stress on both the call center and on the customers. The customers were unhappy, then started calling the call centers. The call centers were, of course, responding or trying to solve those demands. So clearly there was something that was not quite right in how the whole customer support was digitized and automated. But that because there wasn't this holistic approach of how do we look at the process as a whole, a band-aid, an AI band-aid was used to fix a problem that was generated by flawed automation and digitization. And what this example tell us is that we need to be able to take a step back and look at the process as a whole, and then look at what are the implications of us putting AI not just on gaining efficiency, but the stress and the strain we put on the people that remain part of the process. On the second part of the question, I think it's one of my favorite topics, and it's how do we preserve our humanity in the years to come? How do we learn to foster our skills and our ability and our reliance to a certain extent on the machines? And in this process, how do we place those intelligence and increasing intelligence machine in their own role and place in our universe, rather than allowing them to take over? And I think it's enough to look how you operate in our day-to-day life. Is the fact when we walk somewhere or we drive somewhere, we rarely figure out the route by ourselves those days. We rely on machine learning algorithms to tell us what's the best route to take. How would we be able to navigate if our phone will die? Are we still able to make our way around? And I think this is just a tiny of many examples of how reliant are we on technology in our day-to-day life, and how we need to continue to use those tools while we still foster our abilities. And one of the avenues I think we need to be quite careful when using a generative AI is how will we continue to be able to formulate and articulate ideas and write content when sorry, it's so easy now to delegate that to ChatGPT, who will produce the perfect paragraph but that will erode our ability to start, formulating coherent sentences.
That's a great point. Absolutely, the importance of retaining the ability to write sentences, even if we can no longer find our own way through London Underground. So we've got a question from Michael, which is a massive one, but if you have some thoughts on it to share, that would be amazing. So what learnings can companies take from the lessons being learned around responsible AI to understand and tackle the root causes of why their employees may make unethical decisions, and what changes to employee training policies, procedures, and company culture to expect as a result? So has AI yet taught us much that enables us to think about how we could operate differently around ethics more broadly?
Well, that's a very interesting question and a quite unique one. I would say that first of all, what I mentioned earlier about AI being a mirror, it's valid in the enterprises as well. We start seeing, traits of corporate culture that were not obvious, or they were kept less visible to a certain extent. It's like how diverse and inclusive we truly are. And I think, when we start looking at with those lenses, we start seeing that this is less of technology problem and more of a culture problem. And I think before we start looking at how AI can help our organization become more ethical, can we put AI aside and ask the valid question: why would our employees be unethical? What is missing? Is it a question of the working conditions or the working hour or the benefit package? But we need to be able to not resort or call AI anytime we have a problem that is a human-led problem. I think there is this tendency, as I've seen it massively, to look at AI as both a panacea or solving every problem we have, but also being the root cause of all the evils that exist. I mean, ultimately, AI is a new phenomenon, but unethical or problematic culture existed, or problematic behavior in companies existed for a long period of time. So if we want AI really to live up to its true promise and potential, we need to start looking at how well we treat our people and how honest we are when we talk about how great our cultures are. Are they, if we start implementing AI left and right, will this, culture start showing its true colors? And, I'm not saying that, we live in a perfect world, but what we can do in parallel to intentionally design and use AI with, well-designed rules and frameworks and support for those who will be working alongside to look at with a magnifier to our cultures and really look at how well we support our employees in a world that will be increasingly digitized, will be increasingly AI that will take some jobs or modify some jobs, or will require new skills. How well do we support them to go through this journey, to upskill them, to give them the confidence, to include them in those decisions that are being made about them? And I think that's probably a better approach than us thinking it's only AI. If AI is going to be designed with all the ethical guidelines in mind and aligned with some regulation, will be safe. I think that is kind of a narrow view of the overall AI phenomenon, because AI is so intimately linked with the context, will sooner or later reflect how good of a culture we are or not.
Yeah. And what gives you hope? So if you do your job brilliantly, as you no doubt are, and that you're able to influence and collaborate and work with others, what are the opportunities? What could we really be benefiting from in, say, 5 or 10 years' time?
My favorite part in all this is that we will grow closer as a society. So we are at the crossroads in terms of the trust we placed on institution, but also on each other. And I'm just hoping we're not going to go any lower than that. I'm hoping that this is the lowest point we can get. And looking with a lot of optimism at AI and its massive potential to help us diagnosing diseases earlier, discover new cures, really solve the climate change issues, from creating new materials that would potentially dissolve the plastics in the oceans. I think there are so many opportunities. I'm very excited about that. But what I'm hoping in this process is that we will learn how to embrace our humanity, because AI is a mirror. It gives us the opportunity to see what we are great for, and it's enough to start walking into art galleries or historical towns to see how much creativity on so many different fronts our ancestors had, from building castles on pillars in Venice, in building the Chinese wall. There's a lot we can do without having to resort so much to those self-learning algorithms. And I would love us to be able to preserve that and use AI to further augment our intelligence, our capabilities, and delegate to AI only the tasks that humans cannot do. And in this process, continue to discover what makes us great, because we are a great species. We are, despite what, some of the outlooks, the wars and all the other negative events, we're still a great species, and we shouldn't lose track of how amazing we are. And perhaps this is the opportunity for us to reflect on what does it make to be a human, or what do we need to be a great human, and how can we educate our children and the generation to come to recognize this beauty of human nature, so that we, alongside machine, we continue to thrive. Otherwise, machine will cripple in, and we will end up being average humans, all singing the same tune, all dancing the same TikTok dance routine. But at the end of the day, we want to recognize how unique and irreplaceable we are as individuals, and how we need to continue to preserve and celebrate our humanity, while machines do the most boring and tedious tasks, help us discover new avenues to work with the natural world and with ourselves. But that's about it. That's the role of the AI in the future, is to be a tool at our disposals, while we continue to build more and more flourishing societies for ourselves and for our children.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And I think that's such a useful summation of the role of AI. It amplifies the mirror, and it amplifies both the best and the worst of us. So while learning about how to detect cancer, it can, systematize that, and it doesn't get tired, and it will hopefully always be able to be absolutely rigorous in its detection of the screening that it's looking at, or whatever. But equally, the risk is that it amplifies the mistakes that we've made as well. So the opportunity of that mirror, and making sure that that in everything we do, that we make sure that amplifies the best and not the worst of us, is really powerful. A powerful note to end on, I think. Thank you so much, Maria. That was a tour de force, over an hour just of me asking a few prompt questions and hearing from your wisdom. It's been incredibly useful and valuable. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time, and I hope that I know that we've started discussing in future, maybe bringing in some other voices to these conversations so that we can continue it as well. But thank you so much. So grateful to you for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for being a wonderful host, and for all the great questions you and the panelists have asked. And let's continue the conversation. It's great that you guys have started this series, and I'm looking forward to more sessions where we have people with different perspectives that will share their view of how AI can help us build a better society. So thank you very much to everyone listening, and to you guys for inviting me, and looking forward to more amazing sessions.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Mira, and thank you, as you said, to everyone who asked questions. Thank you.